Thanks so much for hopping aboard the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship right here live on the Better Sports Network. Hi, hello, and welcome. It is 7 o'clock in the p.m. on Thursday, January 30th, 2025. I'm your host, Eric Balkman. You follow me on the X and can connect with me there at Eric Balkman, EricBalkman. You know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Slowdown, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and of course, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I'm being joined tonight by one of the best out there, people, one of the best projectionists, one of the best rankers, one of the best in the biz. He is on X at Smola DS. And of course, you follow along with all of his work at DraftSharks.com. Please welcome back onto the show, Mr. Jared Smola. Jared, good evening and welcome.
Eric, happy to be back. Glad to be getting some human interaction tonight because, like you said, I've kind of been chained to my computer for the last 3 weeks trying to get these 2025 projections done.
You know, what's funny is I was listening to Matt Schauf and I think it was Shane Hallam on the latest Draft Sharks podcast a few days ago. And Matt mentioned how, it's been a while since Jared has podcasted because he is up to his elbows in numbers and players and projections and everything like that. And I'm like, well, this is awesome that we can have Jared make his quasi return to podcasting here while you're taking a break from it to let everybody know. Number one, the biggest thing you need to know about the Draft Sharks projections, they are award winning multi times over, right, Jared?
Yeah, we won a few times. I think it was the FSGA Projections Accuracy Award. That was like, I don't know, 10 or so years ago now. That's how long I've been doing this. And then I was tops in the Fantasy Pros multi-year draft rankings accuracy last year, and then someone overtook me in 2024. I can't remember who it was. I should be able to give them credit, but I'm hoping to take my crown back when those results are released this coming summer.
What can you take us behind how the sausage is made without giving everything away at Draft Sharks? Because you have a talented group there. I mean, obviously Shane Hallam, adding him to the force, that was fantastic for you guys. But I mean, Alex Korf peaked in high school. He's been on this show before. Matt Schauf, obviously. Is this a collaborative effort? What are you guys doing? How are you putting these all together?
Yeah, I do the initial projections. I'm the one actually entering in the numbers, and then those will be done within the next couple of weeks, and then we will all get together and probably spend a day and a half to 2 days kind of going through them, arguing them out. The other guys will give their input. We'll shift guys up or down, and then we'll obviously continue doing that for the next 8 months or whatever, right up until week 1.
Okay, so that's awesome, and we're thinking that probably we're about 2 weeks away from the big reveal. I would say roughly, right?
I hope so. I hope in 2 weeks I'm done.
How challenging is it because you guys have done this, to critical acclaim, obviously. How challenging is it to be doing projections when people need them? And we got people drafting in the FFPC right now. How challenging is it to put rankings together when A, you don't know where these rookies are going to land, B, you don't know how they're going to perform at the Combine, Senior Bowl, Senior Bowl maybe, but Combine, and then obviously how the meetings are going with coaches and everything, and then free agency. And a big chunk of the first segment tonight is going to be about all these coaching coordinator changes. That there's a lot of gumbos you got to fit in this soup.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging to do good projections in August and to try to do them now. And I blame you guys for having to do them now because you launched the never too early stuff. People want their projections, so this will actually be as early as we've ever done them. But yeah, it's definitely tricky. The free agency thing. We do try to project if players are going to come back to their team. We will project that, but most of those guys we're just projecting them for now as free agents and sort of giving them baseline numbers as far as the offensive environment they're going to be in, and then we'll adjust from there. As far as the rookies go, I mean, that's where having Shane on board now is awesome because he is the college football guy. We were kind of missing that on staff before hiring Shane, but he is the dynasty guy. He's the Devy guy. He's one of those psychos that plays Devy. So he's obviously had a big input on our initial rookie rankings, both for 2025, and we do have our dynasty rookie rankings already up on the site. Those have been up for a few weeks now. Of course, I think Shane's already adjusted those for some of the stuff we've seen at the Senior Bowl, and we'll be keeping those dynasty rankings updated all year, through the draft and even into the summer.
I think when it comes to having these projections up this early. It's such an invaluable tool. I'll admit it too. Like I draft early, and I love using that MVP board that you guys have. I use it. I've used it in the Scott Fish Bowl. I don't know how many. I actually, I can tell you exactly what happened. Matt Schauf and I used to split a Scott Fish Bowl team till Scott Fish realized, hey, we should get Matt Schauf his own team rather than having hang out and do a team with Balky every year. So, and ever since then, I'm like, well, I can't have Schauf as my partner anymore. So now I use that MVP board. With the exception was last year, and I still had an okay season last year. Every other year I've used that MVP board for the Scott Fish Bowl. I mean, like I've either won the league or finished like top 2 or top maybe third one. But it's been great. I mean, it's a fantastic. Not that I want to turn this into a big DraftSharks infomercial, but this is my testimonial here. I love the way how it's dynamic. It changes based on whatever scoring system you want, based on your award-winning projections, and based on what everybody else is doing in the draft. Things change. The rankings change. Your targets need to change during the draft, and you guys make it super easy.
Yeah, and the stranger the league rules, the more valuable the draft war room is, right? Because like you can find good PPR rankings, but finding good rankings for something like the Scott Fish Bowl, I think literally, that format does not exist anywhere else outside of Scott Fish Bowl. But being able to plug those rules into the draft war room, have those rules applied to our projections, and that spits out, player projections, point projections based on those exact rules. I think again, if you want to take most advantage of the draft war room, get in a league with really funky rules, because I think you'll be at a big advantage.
And I think like as fantasy football has exploded, we are seeing a lot more private leagues being put together with like weird rules,
Sure.
First downs for tight ends or whatever, and points per rushing attempt, stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely crazy. Now you don't have to worry about crazy rules with the FFPC except for tight end premium scoring, but you can utilize these DraftSharks projections when they're out in a couple of weeks, or you could just draft right now in the Never Too Early Best Ball and the Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball tournaments. A $40,000 and $10,000 grand prize, respectively. Enter for $200 in the Never Too Early. You get a chance at $40,000. The $35 entry is for the Superflex, and still a $10,000 grand prize. These tournaments started this past Sunday, and they will run all the way through April 24th, which is the first day of the 2025 NFL Draft live in Green Bay, Wisconsin. They are available right now. Drafts are 30-second, 2-hour, 6-hour clocks, and 60-second clocks, obviously, as well. So that's at myffpc.com. And oh, by the way, while you're there, check out all the Dynasty Orphans we have posted. The entry fees range from $77 all the way up to $5,000. Many teams have already had their entry fees discounted for 2025 as well. 1,800 plus leagues. That's probably going to get up into over 2,000 before the end of drafting season in 2025. And we've never had a dynasty league fold in 15 years at the FFPC. So if you want to play FFPC fantasy football 365 days a year, you can at myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch, tonight, pushing all the buttons. Let's go around the NFL, Jared. And where else do we start but America's team? Big D has a new HC. Brian Schottenheimer promoted from offensive coordinator to their new head coach. I think Dak Prescott was talking about this, the importance of continuity, right? He's been working with Brian Schottenheimer. He gets to work with him now again as his head coach. Obviously, the influence is still going to be there. And, 2024 didn't go the way the Cowboys wanted. Injuries had a lot to do with that. But I look back to 2023, man, that offense was humming along on all cylinders. Prescott had a big year. Lamb had a big year. And, we'll see what they do at running back this year. But Rico Dowdle was obviously all right last year. I mean, he didn't let a whole lot of people down based on where you drafted him. I was talking with my co-host on my Friday night high stakes fantasy football hour, and I kind of was like, oh, this is just, Jerry Jones to the hilt, right? He wants the world, can't get it with Mike McCarthy, so he lets him go, thinks the grass is greener, and it's not. And Farrell pointed out, not so fast, Balky. He doesn't think that this was a bad hire. In fact, he thinks this might be a good hire. And what we care about, maybe this is a good hire for fantasy footballers too.
Yeah, that 2023 Cowboys team led the NFL in points, and they were 5th in yards. I mean, my initial reaction to the Schottenheimer thing was, I think like everyone else, just like meh, like they could have done better, kind of boring. There's definitely, and I still think there were higher upside options out there, especially if they had, gotten into the process a bit sooner. But like you said, Eric, I think it was a Dak Prescott hire, and I think Dak Prescott likes Brian Schottenheimer. Dak Prescott was quarterback 6 in that 2023 season. I know we're going to talk about him a bit later as well, but I think he could be a value. I think this Cowboys offense in general could just be a value, because I think people are disappointed in them coming off last year. I think they're not excited about the Schottenheimer hire. I think it could lead to value in fantasy drafts.
I think, and I'll bring up the ADP data from Fantasy Mojo here. I don't think there's much of a discount on CeeDee Lamb right now. How do you handle projecting a guy like Dowdle, knowing that a lot of people are of the assumption that Dallas is going to spend a day 1 or day 2 pick on a running back? Of course, that was the assumption last year, and it didn't really happen. So I don't know. How do you handle a guy like Dowdle? And I think this just gets into the minutia of how difficult it is to put together rankings this early, because this is a backfield that, we kept waiting for something to happen last year. It never did. Now we're waiting again this year. But Jared, there's no guarantee that they do something big to bring in a new body in that room.
Well, there's no guarantee Dowdle's back in Dallas because he's a free agent. So
right.
we actually haven't projected as a free agent now. I think there's a decent chance he's not back in Dallas. Of course, you see Ashton Genty mocked to the Cowboys plenty. I feel like we've been mocking running backs to Dallas for the past couple of years now, since Zeke's kind of been over the hill. So yeah, that backfield is wide open. There's quite a few backfields. I mean, Dallas and Minnesota come to mind immediately, where there's just like there's no one there. That job is completely wide open. Maybe Dallas brings back Dowdle. Maybe Aaron Jones ends up back in Minnesota. But I think, especially if you're looking for Ashton Genty landing spots, those two come to mind as probably the best spots for his potential 2025 value at least.
Are we rooting for Minnesota over Dallas for fantasy?
I think so. I think just a better offense overall, right? I think they'd both be good. The most important thing, and honestly, I think wherever Genty lands, like, he's gonna get work right away. But ideally, you'd like him to go to a spot where, like, the runway is super clear. Week 1, he's going to be getting 70% of the snaps, and I think Dallas and Minnesota would both afford him that opportunity.
Dak Prescott, quarterback 18 right now at the 1107. Let's put a pin in that conversation. I want to come back to that. But I do want to cover Pete Carroll making his return. What is this, 2023 already? Mike Vrabel and Pete Carroll have NFL head coaching jobs again. But yeah, it's true. Pete Carroll back in. And I said this too. The new GM in Las Vegas, and this will make me feel old, John Spytek. I once shared a high school football field with him, Jared. His Waukesha Catholic Memorial beat my Fox Valley Lutheran team my junior year of high school 48-3. We kicked the field goal with about a minute and a half to go, and we all celebrated like we just won the Super Bowl when we actually lost by 45. But he was a two-way player, wide receiver and defensive end, had a career at Michigan, teammates with Tom Brady, and now he and Tom Brady are trying to make the Raiders great again. Their first step was hiring Pete Carroll. I don't have a strong feeling about this. I mean, we'll see what happens. I think the defensive coordinator is staying the same in Las Vegas. I don't know. Have they named an OC there yet? And what are your thoughts about Pete Carroll? How we should be viewing the Raiders now with Tom Brady and Pete Carroll having their hands all over the Raiders?
Yeah, no official OC hire at least as far as like an hour ago when I stepped away from the computer. But Darrell Bevel's been the name connected there, which of course would reunite them from their Seattle days. And then there's even talk that Russell Wilson could land there, like that him and Carroll have mended fences. I don't know. It's an interesting hire for the Raiders because like they're obviously a rebuilding team. What is their goal with this? What is Carroll, 73 or 74?
73, yeah.
Yeah, like even if he turns them around, by the time they've been turned around, like how many years does he have left? He's going to be turning this over to someone else at that point. So I don't know. I get that they probably want this established, kind of proven head coach to turn the organization around because they do need that. But just obviously, there's no long-term upside to Carroll. Like they're hoping to get 2-3 good years out of him, I guess. But yeah, as far as the OC goes, sounds like Bevel's the favorite, but we'll see.
This might be like a culture rebrand too, right? That
sure.
Pete Carroll gets there. He like you said, 2-3 years there, reestablish some winning ways. And then maybe you never know. Maybe the new OC would be groomed to take over when Carroll eventually steps away. I don't know. But I think while I can't pinpoint exactly how this is good as for fantasy, it does make me feel better about drafting Raiders, and we'll see what they do at OC and what they do at QB. That will be two big questions the Raiders have yet to answer. The Jacksonville Jaguars have answered the question of who will be their head coach in 2025 with the answer of one Liam Coen. He also 3 days ago, also told the press that he's actually going to be calling plays for the Jags this year. He's 39 years old, was the OC for Tampa last year, a guy that had, we thought, big shoes to fill with Dave Canales kind of rejuvenating that Buccaneers offense. He goes to Carolina to work with Bryce Young and that offense there, but they didn't miss a beat. In fact, you could make it the case that the Buccaneers offense was actually better in 24 than it was in 23. Baker Mayfield, 4,500 passing yards, tied for the lead, or maybe he had the lead in touchdowns this season with 41, 16 picks as well. Trevor Lawrence is a great guy to work with. Brian Thomas looks bona fide. He looks unbelievable. We might see some more from the slot from him this year too, which is another great reason to draft Brian Thomas early. Still got to answer the question of what they're going to do at running back. But I think Coen as a head coach, we never know how good these coordinators are going to be, Jared. Mm-hmm. But as far as the Jaguars offense goes, I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to see what Coen can do with this Jaguars offense in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, there's upside at least to Coen, right? He's kind of like the anti-Pete Carroll. Like we know what Carroll is. There's probably not as much upside. Coen, like I think he's probably a good offensive coordinator. We don't even know that. It was 1 year in Tampa. He was bouncing around between McVay's Rams and Kentucky before that. Like, and obviously what he did in Tampa last year was impressive. The NFL is obviously high in this guy because the Bucs were ready to make him, I think, the highest paid coordinator in the league. It looked like he was going to take that job. Then he bolts for Jacksonville. I'm sure he got a bunch of money from Jacksonville. So the league's high on him. Like you said, Eric, there's plenty of weapons in Jacksonville. I think that they need to bolster the O-line. That was a big issue last year. I'm intrigued by the backfield. Those are two guys, Etienne and Tank Bigsby, I want to be taking shots on early in drafts. And we obviously don't know what the backfield split is going to look like, but what Coen did with that Bucs running game this year was super impressive. I know the passing game was awesome, but the Bucky Irving breakout season, even Rachaad White, I think he averaged 4.3 yards per carry this year, which he was at like 3.6 over his first two seasons. So even he was much more effective. We had the big Sean Tucker game that week against the Saints. So I'm intrigued by the backfield because I know Etienne and Tank Bigsby are cheap. I think there's a chance that one or even both of those guys ends up being value.
Very cheap. In fact, I just looked up the ADP on Mojo right now. Travis Etienne 906 and Tank Bigsby at 1009 as far as their ADPs go in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament with the FFPC. That's running back 34, running back 38 respectively. Yeah, I mean the zero RBers are going to go crazy for that value there for sure. To get either one of those guys in a Liam Coen-led offense, and you don't have to sacrifice anything higher than 9th round draft capital. Yeah, sign me up for sure. The Jets have also hired a new new head coach as they poached the Detroit Lions to get Aaron Glenn, upgraded from defensive coordinator to the new head man in New York. Glenn will take over a team that, I don't know, man. Like perpetual disappointment, I guess, is probably appropriate to say, both fantasy and how the team is done. He was the first round draft pick of the Jets 30 years ago. And now fast forward to three decades later, he's the man in charge. We don't know what's going to happen with the offense and who they're going to have at quarterback. Will Garrett Wilson still be on this team? I think he will, but there's a non-zero chance of anything. So I don't have many questions about the defense. Like that, you have Sauce Gardner, you have Quinnen Williams, and then you have Aaron Glenn, a really sharp guy. Think about what he was able to do with that Detroit defense this year when they were seemingly down to like 7th stringers for the last 2 months of the season. My concern is, Jared, is the defense going to be so good that we have to kind of curtail our expectations of how good this offense could be? And even if it is good, is it just going to be the Breece Hall and Braylon Allen show? I mean, there's a lot to unpack here with this Aaron Glenn hire in New York.
Yeah, and Breece Hall is the guy I want to be in on this Jets offense. Now, I mean, this offense is basically impossible to project right now. We don't know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. It's not, from what I've heard, most of the names connected to the Jets OC position are Lions guys. It seems like Glenn might bring someone over, someone who was working under Ben Johnson in Detroit to be his new OC, which would definitely be exciting with how good that Lions offense has been. But we don't know who the OC is. We don't know. I mean, I don't think Aaron Rodgers comes back to New York for 2025. But, we don't know for sure yet. Garrett Wilson, you mentioned, he's shipped out of town. Devontae Adams, he's under contract, but it seems like, his cap number is so big that there's a chance he's not there either. So lots of questions to answer, but Breece Hall, and I don't know if you have his ADP pulled up, Eric, but he's someone I'm going to want to be very high on. I think as we have always seen with Aaron Rodgers offenses, they tend to be Aaron Rodgers centric, especially inside the red zone. And last year's Jets were first in the NFL in red zone pass rate. When they got near the goal line, Aaron Rodgers was throwing the football. That was at least part of the reason Breece Hall underwhelmed. Assuming Rodgers is not there in 2025, I think the Jets go back to being a Breece Hall centric offense. I think you could be looking at him as like, one of the top 2 or 3 roles in the NFL in terms of touches. And I still am a big time believer in the talent. I mean, I think if you would ask someone at this time last year, who's the biggest talent between Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Breece Hall, you probably would have got equal answers for all 3. Right? Like plenty of people would have said Breece Hall is the most talented back. He's still right in the smack dab in his prime. I think he's a pretty easy bounce back candidate in 2025 again, especially if Rodgers is no longer with the Jets.
I just looked it up too. Breece Hall, last year, what was he, like a top 3, top 5 pick in most FFPC drafts? Right now, he has fallen to running back 10 at the end of the second round, 210 right now. He is right behind Bucky Irving and Josh Jacobs. He is going right ahead of Jonathan Taylor. And it sounds like that is something that you want to be definitely in business with. Yeah,
and again, I don't have all the projections done and guys compiled in order. To me, it feels like Breece Hall should be a 1-2 turn pick. So I think he's 10 spots too cheap right now.
And that could obviously normalize. This is why we always say you want to draft early, because this kind of stuff. I mean, I could easily see him going, past Josh Jacobs, past Bucky Irving. Ashton Genty is going in front of him right now as well. McCaffrey, I could see Hall moving in front of McCaffrey. Derrick Henry, another year older. I mean, he's going right now more than a half round ahead of Hall. That could correct too. And obviously Achane at the 202. You could see him move up there. And then all of a sudden he's at the turn. The top 3 running backs being drafted right now in the top 5 are Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and then Gibbs. And they're going at within the top 5 picks, like I said, and then Achane's the next one going not till the second round. So that's the way the running back lay of the land is shaping up the running backs right now.
I don't think there should be much of a gap at all between Gibbs and Breece Hall. That might be a hot take at this point, but I don't think there should be that big. I'd lean towards Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think they should be going within 2, 3, 4 picks of each other.
Let me throw this at you. You said you don't think Rodgers is back, right? In New York?
That'd be my guess that he's not back.
Back in 2018, the Jets took a quarterback with the 3rd overall pick, and he has bounced around the NFL since then. Had a resurgent year in Minnesota. Would the Jets entertain bringing back Sam Darnold if the Vikings let him get to free agency as their starting quarterback this year?
I mean, it's a completely new regime, right? I mean, the owner is the same.
Yeah.
I think the bigger question was, would Darnold want to go back to New York, right?
The fans are still the same. The media is still the same for Darnold.
Exactly. It'd be great. I mean, I think that'd be a nice move for the Jets. I know Darnold closed the season poorly. He's still, I think he's an average NFL quarterback, which would be, I think, enough when you have Breece Hall and you have that defense.
Mr. Bakes-A-Lot hanging out with us in the YouTube chat right now, and he wants to know when the dynasty leagues are kicking off for the FFPC. You can pick up orphans right now. We don't have any startup leagues. Once those dynasty orphans are all spoken for, I'm sure we'll release some startups coming up, Mr. Bakes-A-Lot, but not right now. He also has a question for dynasty, and I think this is something that certain high-stakes players that are playing dynasty fantasy football are considering right now. After Saquon Barkley, Jared, comes off this massive career year, if he would have played one more game, he may have actually broken Eric Dickerson's rushing record for most yards rushing in one year. He's trying to trade him right now, selling as high as possible. He wants to know, would you trade Saquon Barkley for Ladd McConkey or Brock Bowers straight up full PPR. This is a tight end premium dynasty league he's talking about. Would you trade Barkley for either McConkey or Bowers? Not both of them, one or the other straight up. Dynasty, obviously.
Yeah, and I hate to be this guy, but the answer in Dynasty is always it depends. It depends on the rest of your roster. Really, in this case, I think it depends where your team's at. If you're competing, if you're you think in the top half of your league heading into 2025, I would hang on to Barkley. I still think he is slightly ahead of Bijan for me, the RB1 heading into 2025. At this point, I think he's a top 5 redraft pick. If I'm competing, I'd lean towards hanging on to him. If you're in rebuild mode, I think he's an excellent trade candidate right now. I believe he's 28 or he's going to be 28. So you're probably looking at like 1-2 more years of elite production. And that said, I'd still probably try to get a bit more for Saquon. I think you could tack on maybe a second round pick to Ladder Bowers. I would make that trade. So again, I think it totally depends on where your team's at.
One other question I wanted to get to, and my apologies to Permar. Hopefully he didn't check out. Permar99, one of our longtime viewers of our show. Based on last year, what's your number one criteria when you're putting together projections for next season? Obviously, it's a blend of a lot of things. Does one particular aspect of coming up with projections stand out maybe more so than the others?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing in fantasy football is usage, right? We want guys with touches. Now, how to project usage, part of it is what we saw last year. Part of it is you got to look at personnel changes and coaching changes. Then you got to look at just who's good, right? Because in the end, good players are going to end up getting the football. So when you can find someone who maybe didn't get the ball last year, but was efficient on a per touch basis, on a per play basis, that's someone you can potentially project for more volume this coming season and who could be a value in fantasy drafts. But it always comes down to if I could accurately project one thing, 100% it would be getting the volume projections right, because that's what fuels fantasy points.
And obviously very good advice there too. When in doubt, draft the guy who's touching the ball the most. Sure. Sometimes I shy away from that, but I think I shy away from that when the price gets too high. And the example I always use is Michael Turner from a few years back when he signed that deal with Atlanta. And he was going like, I never thought he was super talented, Jared, and he was going, among the top 5 or 6 running backs with all these other super talented players at the same position. And I stayed away from that because Turner needed all that volume in order to stay afloat, where these other guys were, just better running backs than him. That's the only time I shy away from it. Part of the reason, though, Turner was going that high was because of usage. Exactly what you're saying. Yep. Volume is king. Volume is king. That's something we can take away from this. The Bears, who have not been very good the last decade and a half almost now, have tried to turn the page again. And they have hired Ben Johnson, the Wunderkind from Detroit, the offensive coordinator there, who has had a slew of insanely good talent there with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, throw in David Montgomery, Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams there. He moves on to become the head coach in Chicago. I believe he is going to be calling plays there as well. Xavier McKinney was on a podcast earlier this week, and he said that the NFC North is going to have 4 Super Bowl contending teams next year. He's a big believer in the Bears. Again, the Packers lost to the Bears in the final game of the season. Maybe that's weighing in on him too. But the talent that Ben Johnson inherits in Chicago, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore. I don't know what they're going to do at running back. I don't know if Keenan Allen's going to be back. But those 3 core young players, and Odunze, Moore, and Caleb Williams, got to be super excited about this, Jared. Are we perhaps too excited about the Ben Johnson effect for these guys in Chicago?
I guess I'll have to hear the ADPs on those guys to tell you. But I'll tell you, I'm excited. Now they need to fix the offensive line. That was just as big a problem as Caleb's propensity to hang on to the ball or Shane Waldron's play calling last year. The offensive line was bad. They need to fix that. I think they will. I think they'll add to it this offseason. I also think Ben Johnson's scheme can help mask some of the O-line. And I love everything I've heard from these press conferences with Ben Johnson so far. Just talking about, for one, he loves Caleb Williams, which you kind of knew. The fact that he took this job, he's high on Caleb Williams. He could have had a head coaching job last year. He decided to come back to Detroit. He wanted the right opportunity. He obviously thinks this is it. And he's also talked about molding the offense to Caleb Williams' strengths. And I love to hear that. I also think, it was a run-leaning offense in Detroit because they have two great running backs and a great offensive line. I expect the Bears offense to be more pass-leaning because I think that's where the strength of that team is. So, when I'm projecting the Bears, I'm not really using the, pass rates we saw from Detroit. I think it's going to be a completely different offense in Chicago. I'm super excited about Caleb Williams. I think you saw flashes of what made him the number 1 overall pick last year. You also saw him run the ball. He ran for almost 500 yards last year, which, you do anything close to that and improve the passing, which I think he will. I think Caleb Williams could very easily be a top 10 fantasy quarterback in 2025.
I said this at the top of the show. We never know how these coordinators are going to be when it comes to being head coaches. But two things I really like about Ben Johnson. Number one, you said it, he could add his pick of the litter last year and maybe even the year before that too. Definitely this year. He zeroed in on this job, and 2 days after they were eliminated from the playoffs, he was already the head coach. So he wanted this one. The other thing I like, and I've always liked this about just coaches in general, whatever level, whatever sport, the best coaches are the ones who come in, look at the talent they have at their disposal, and craft a scheme to exploit the strengths of those players. They don't come in with a scheme and say, this is what we're running, like it or lump it. That's not good coaching. So two great things about Ben Johnson right there that I think fantasy owners should be excited about. Permar99 wants to know, will DeAndre Swift be the goal line back for Chicago? I believe Roschon Johnson is still under contract there. I know Swift is as well. So they could be getting the band back together with Swift and Johnson. Jared, how do you see that scenario unfolding with again, the offensive line has to be better. Detroit had a great one. Chicago is the opposite of whatever great is at the moment.
Yeah, and it's funny too because Swift was in Detroit for Ben Johnson's first year as offensive coordinator in 2022, and Swift basically got phased out of the offense that year. Jamal Williams ended up being the clear lead back on that team. I think DeAndre Swift, I'm looking at it now, he had 99 carries in 14 games that year. So it was 7.1 carries per game, which is pretty easily his career low. So no, it was 3 years ago. I don't know how Ben Johnson feels. Hell, maybe Ben Johnson took the Bears job to reunite with DeAndre Swift. Who knows? Probably not. That would not be my guess based on what we saw in 2022. So I would not be surprised if the Bears actually, invest in the backfield and add another guy, add a Ben Johnson running back that, could end up being the lead back there. So I'd be careful with Swift in early drafts.
Give me a yay or nay on these ADPs for Bears right now. And you tell me if it's too high or as Goldilocks would say, just right. DJ Moore, wide receiver 17 at the 401. Yes or no?
That's about right.
About right. Roma Dunze, wide receiver 32 at the 512.
That's a little pricey for me. Again, I like the offense. I don't love what I saw out of Rome last year. I get it, year 2 guy. If anything, I'd say a bit higher than I'd have him.
Just to talk about Odunze just for a second, what specifically did you not like about him last year? Was it route running? Was it his hands? I just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, all the efficiency stuff I look at, yards per route, PFF grade, that type of stuff was kind of disappointing. Not horrible, but a bit underwhelming for the fact that he was an early first round pick.
And now he's going less than 2 rounds after DJ Moore as well.
Yeah, I would much rather have DJ Moore among those two.
Caleb Williams, quarterback 12 at the 905.
I'll be buying at that price. I mean, it's elevated from where he finished, but again, I think he'll be higher than that when we launch our rankings in a couple of weeks.
And then the last one, just because we were talking about Swift, running back 33 at that same 905 ADP.
That's not bad. I mean, that has some of the risk baked in, right? Like if the Bears don't add to the backfield, I think Swift probably goes 6-7 running back spots higher than that.
I would even contend maybe even higher than that too, with the Ben Johnson effect. And if they stick with Swift and Johnson, I'm with you there. Speaking of Detroit, they had to find somebody to take the spot of Ben Johnson for their offensive coordinator. They have gone to Denver to poach John Morton, who I believe was the passing game coordinator for the Broncos. He's been an offensive coordinator once. It was several years ago with the Jets, and the offense was not good. I think he was dealing with some talent deficiencies and some injuries that year. Do we know anything? Can we glean anything from John Morton's past that's going to say, hey, the Lions are going to keep this train moving, or maybe we should give pause before we draft any Detroit players?
Yeah, well, Morton was with the Lions again in that 2022 season. Ben Johnson's first as offensive coordinator. He was a senior offensive assistant on that team before going to Denver the past year. So I do think the goal here is continuity for the Lions. I mean, it's going to be tough to replicate some of the magic tricks Ben Johnson pulled out with some of those trick plays he ran, but I do think they're looking for continuity here. And yeah, Morton, like you said, 2017 Jets, he was the OC of, is that right?
Yeah, 2017. Yes.
Yeah. Josh McCown and Bryce Petty. There's a name for you. They were the quarterbacks of that team. So the offense wasn't good, but I'm not holding that against them. I also like that he spent, he was with Sean Payton in Denver. That can't, hurt getting some experience under Payton.
Yeah, that 2017 Jets team, they offered the offensive coordinator position to God himself, and God looked at those quarterbacks, said, I can't win with these guys. And then okay, we'll get John Morton here instead. One other thing before we completely move on from the NFC North, Cullen Hoffman hanging out with us tonight. I brought this up, I think it was last week on one of my shows. What about the Bears utilizing that 9th overall pick on Ashton Jeanty, bringing him aboard to pair him with DeAndre Swift? Any chance of that? I mean, that would be very exciting to have Ashton Jeanty in a backfield that has its plays called by Ben Johnson.
Yeah, and I don't think Jeanty would be pairing with Swift at that point. I think he'd be disposing of DeAndre Swift. Again, I think wherever Jeanty lands, again, he's going to be the guy pretty much right away. And it's interesting, I wonder, again, the Lions were obviously run heavy under Ben Johnson. I'm not expecting that in Chicago, but I kind of think Dan Campbell maybe pushed Johnson a little bit in that direction, on top of the personnel and the fact that, that was a good team the past couple of years. They were playing with leads, able to run the ball. But I mean, maybe Ben Johnson thinks having a elite Jahmyr Gibbs type back is important to his offense. And if that's the case, Jeanty, I think, will still be sitting there when they're on the clock at 9. So it would make sense. And I think, I don't know, we talked about Dallas and Minnesota as the best landing spots for Jeanty. Chicago might be even better. I mean, again, the offensive line's a problem. But if they spend the 9th overall pick on him and he's in this Ben Johnson-led offense, I mean, to me, Jeanty would be a easy first-round pick in 2025 redraft.
I know you are still molding the clay of these rankings for DraftSharks and these projections, but knowing what you just said about Ashton Jeanty, with whoever drafts him, he's going to be the guy there. How many running backs are worth drafting over Jeanty this year? Right now, the FFPC never too early players are saying we're taking 6 running backs ahead of him, but he is the 7th guy off the board. How does that grab you, Jared?
I think he shouldn't be any lower than that. I think you could push him a spot or two higher. And I think, if he landed in Chicago with the 9th overall pick, Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson are the only running backs I would definitely take over Ashton Jeanty. I think, to me, and I'm going off the top of my head here, maybe I'm, we'll see where things land. But to me, he'd be there with Jahmyr Gibbs and Breece Hall. To me, I think as RBs 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. I mean, the only other guys going ahead of him in redraft is Achane, Henry, and McCaffrey. And it sounds like you'd take Jeanty over all 3 of those guys if he ends up in Chicago.
Yeah, McCaffrey's. I would definitely take him over Achane and Henry. McCaffrey's going to be a guy I'm going to lose sleep over all offseason. I can tell already because, I mean, if he's right, he could lead running backs in fantasy points again. But he's, I think, 28 years old now, coming off a couple of injuries last year. He could also be a pretty colossal bust if his body just doesn't hold up. So I think McCaffrey, especially at this point of the offseason, just seems to me he has a super wide range of outcomes.
The thing is with McCaffrey, it'd be easy for me to say, yeah, I'm not interested in a 28-year-old running back with his injury history. No thanks. But then I think about what he has done, and I almost got to give him special rules, for how I draft him. And I think that's, like you said, losing sleep over McCaffrey this year. I think a lot of fantasy players are going to be losing sleep. Think about all the people like me who drafted him at 1st overall and probably 2 or 3 leagues last year. And it sucked, putting up with that all season. And to now put my chips back on that. Granted, it's going to cost me a mid-2nd round pick instead of a a top 2 or top 3 pick like it was last year. But and the Niners offense in general. I mean, I just don't know. Permar, we will get to Cam Scatabo conversation coming up before we say goodnight here. But we have so much more to get to before we get to that. And I want to focus in on specifically week 2 of the 2024 NFL season, Jared. I'm old enough to remember it. When Klint Kubiak was going to be the next great head coach in the NFL. Look at what he's doing with this Saints offense. 40 against, I can't remember whoever they played week 1, 40 against the Cowboys in week 2. Where's this guy been hiding? And then injuries hit, stuff happens, and all of a sudden the Saints season goes down the tubes perhaps earlier than we thought it was going to be. But Klint Kubiak still going to be calling plays, just not for the Saints. The Seahawks have now hired him as their new offensive coordinator, taking over for, I always butcher the guy's name. Was it Ryan Grubb from Washington, Jared, who was there last year?
Yeah. Yep, Grubb. That's right.
Ryan Grubb. And apparently it was too much passing. Too much passing for Mike McDonald's liking. He didn't like it. Jackson Smith and Jigba is like, what do you mean too much passing? I just had the best season of my career. It was fantastic. So I think that the Kubiak thing is interesting because clearly we know Seattle wants much more of a balance there between running and passing. And this is good news for Kenneth Walker, maybe Zach Charbonnet as well. What does this Klint Kubiak hire do for not only those 2 running backs I mentioned, but for Metcalf, for Jackson Smith and Jigba, for Geno Smith, quite frankly? How does the Seattle offense change this year in your eyes now?
And it's interesting too, because Seattle, I know through the first month or so of the season, they were like easily the pass heaviest offense in the NFL. Looking not just like pass rate, but pass rate over expected, neutral pass rate, all that stuff that kind of adjusts for game situation. They eased off that over the final 2/3 of the season, where they were still up there, but they were more like the 8th or 10th pass heaviest offense in the NFL. So the shift here isn't going to be, I think, as big as some people might imagine. I do think the pass rate's coming down under Kubiak. I think, like you said, Eric, Mike McDonald, defensive-minded head coach, wants to run the ball a bit more. Big question for me is what Kubiak thinks of those running backs, because Ryan Grubb loved Ken Walker. Ken Walker's role, particularly in the passing game, was awesome when he was healthy last year, but he dealt with injuries again. Charbonnet showed really well in his, couple starts, a couple games as lead back over the second half of the season. So I'm going to be listening to, what we hear out of Seattle the rest of this offseason in terms of, their plans for this backfield. You're going to get more volume in general. And I think those are both guys I want to take shots on in drafts right now. I mean, Ken Walker, I still think he is a big time talent. I think he's clearly a better runner than Zach. And I like Zach Charbonnet. He's a solid back, but I think Ken Walker is, the much more dynamic player. He proved he could do stuff in the passing game this past year. So he's someone, he let me know where his ADP is. I'm assuming he's, probably around RB20, if not a bit later.
Earlier, actually. He's running back 17 right now.
Okay.
At 503. Charbonnet, running back 36 at the 1003. So about 5 rounds of difference between those two guys right now.
Drafters are too damn sharp nowadays. I feel like 5 years ago, 5 years ago, Ken Walker would have been like RB23, and I'd be saying, buy. RB17 sounds about right to me. I definitely want some pieces of that price tag, and then same goes with Charbonnet. I mean, I think he at minimum he showed last year he's an elite handcuff. Where if something happens to Ken Walker, you're talking about Zach Charbonnet as a top 10 back. Then I do think, with the coaching change, there's some opportunity for Charbonnet to play a bigger role this year, even when Walker's healthy.
I think back to last year during drafting season. Raheem Mostert was coming off a 21 touchdown season, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, dude is a 3rd round pick the following year.
Yeah.
People are like, this guy scored 21 touchdowns. What are we doing letting him slip to the 9th, 10th round or whatever? And, all the rest of us are just snickering like, yeah, take him in the 3rd round. We don't care.
Yeah.
And now it's not even close. It's just
not even close.
There's no advantage anymore except for DraftSharks, which is your unfair advantage. But I will say I don't know what it's been, if it's just a confluence of information, if it's much more focus in on coaching and tendencies and we know more now, but fantasy drafters, I'm with you. It's
Yeah.
Those soft drafts are just, they're few and far between now, man. Few and far between.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's funny. Mostert slips to round 10 in drafts, and it ends up being right. He probably should have gone even later than that, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel back in New England together. God bless them. As Russ Cole says, time is a flat circle. Josh McDaniels, has he been officially hired as the OC in New England, Jared?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we can take this as gospel that it's happening. He was the offensive coordinator for New England from 2006 to 2008, and then again from 2012 to 2021. McDaniels is going to have the luxury of working with Drake May, who looks like a really promising quarterback. The rest of the offense, can't really. I mean, it's not anybody I'm really excited about. But does the pairing of McDaniels and May for you, Jared, does that manufacture any goodness that's going to trickle down to any of the other skill position players on the Patriots?
Yeah, I think for me, Josh McDaniels was kind of like a neutral hire. Didn't get me excited. Wasn't disappointed in. I mean, McDaniels had some nice seasons with Tom Brady. If you look at his offenses without Brady, and I have them all here, just like where they finished in total points: 20th, 19th, 32nd, 27th. There was a 6th. 2021 Patriots with Mac Jones were 6th in points. And then his Vegas teams finished 12th and 23rd in points. Like a lot of like middling finishes on his non-Tom Brady offenses. So I don't think he's some like offensive genius. I think he's fine. He's at least experienced. He's at least proven in the NFL. I think he's, probably an upgrade from what we had in New England last year. So again, I'm not like docking Drake May and the Patriots offense for the hire. I'm not really boosting him either. I am in on Drake May, both in 2025 and going forward. I think, his numbers weren't great, but when you put him in the context of that offense as a rookie who had to come in mid-season, I think his numbers were great. Like I was impressed by what he was able to do. And of course we got the rushing. His rushing was, I think, even ahead of Caleb Williams on a per game basis. And they weren't even calling designed runs for Drake May. I know the coaching staff even said late in the season, they were like, we're not going to call design runs for Drake May when we're going nowhere this year. We're just looking at 2025. We're not going to put this guy at further risk of injury. So I think McDaniels had Cam Newton for at least one season. So he has some experience, and I'm not comparing Drake May to Cam Newton, but I think Drake May can do some designed rushing stuff. I think he's someone who can give us, 400 rushing yards per season as a pro. And then again, I think we'll see about the passing. He should be better in year 2. They obviously need to add weapons. I think, that's a potential landing spot for Tet McMillan in the first round of the draft. I think it'd be an awesome spot for T. Higgins. I would love to see T. Higgins end up there where he'd be the clear alpha wide receiver with what I think is a talented quarterback. I think it'd be good news for Higgins. Obviously would be good news for Drake May. So still some bolstering of the supporting cast they needed to do there in New England, but I'm definitely in on Drake May.
Drake May right now, quarterback 16 behind Anthony Richardson, right ahead of CJ Stroud right now. You can get him in the FFPC Never Too Early tournament in the mid-10th. We've been talking a lot about coaches, Jared. I want to talk about a few players here. Dalton Kincaid let a lot of fantasy players down. The comp I keep hearing from everybody this offseason is, man, I was deciding between Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid, and I went with Kincaid and have been kicking myself ever since. Now, meanwhile, fast forward to 2025 Never Too Early drafts, Trey McBride, tight end 2, Dalton Kincaid, all the way down at tight end 12. He's being drafted at the end of the 8th, the start of the 9th round in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, which is tight end premium. Now, Dawson Knox did reveal that, and I think the reports were that this happened in maybe week 12, but that Kincaid's been playing through a torn PCL. How do you factor that in? We know the chops are there. You think about how he finished the 2023 season. What happened to Kincaid this year, Jared? And perhaps more importantly, what's going to happen with Kincaid in 2025?
Yeah, week 10 was when he suffered the knee injury, and I don't think it was ever officially reported as a PCL at that point. I think Dr. Chow, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Dr. Chow. I think at that point he just, based on the video, said it was a PCL. So yeah, Kincaid was playing through that for the final 3 regular season games he played, and then the playoffs. He was underwhelming even before that, though. So I'm not gonna give him a free pass based on the knee injury. That said, I think I'm still going to be in on him if he's tight end 12. This is a guy who, was a strong prospect, first round pick, had a pretty nice rookie season. He did still draw targets at a strong rate this past season. The efficiency was way down. I mean, 59% catch rate for Dalton Kincaid. He was up around 70% as a rookie. He was at 80% as a rookie. So his catch rate dropped by 20 percentage points. That's absurd. That's going to rebound. He should still be an ascending player. He's still on a Josh Allen-led passing game, a passing game that still doesn't have an alpha wide receiver. I mean, Khalil Shakir had a nice season. Keon Coleman maybe takes a step in year 2. We'll see what the Bills do elsewhere at the position this offseason. But I mean, there's a path to a 20% target share for Kincaid again in 2025 in a strong offense. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of buy the dip on Kincaid in redraft.
Kincaid is going one spot ahead of Tucker Kraft right now. He's going at tight end 13. And Matt LaFleur said in his season-ending presser that he wants to get Kraft more involved in the offense in 2025. Hey, that's great, but the Packers love to spray the ball all over the field.
Yeah.
Now, I have been on the record. I've been saying this since the Watson injury, Jared. I don't think he plays at all in 2025. I'm not buying this. He's coming back in week 12, week 13. And even if he does, I don't think it's a player you want to be in business with for sure. Now, that said, Romeo Doubs, I don't know what his status is with that second concussion with the Guardian cap. It looked nasty. The Packers do need to figure out something at wide receiver because what they have right there is not enough. So maybe there is a path for Tucker Kraft to be more involved. He was a guy that was being drafted as like tight end 20, tight end 21. Luke Musgrave just looks like a jag at best at this point. Tucker Kraft at tight end 13. Is that also a guy that you'd be targeting? If you miss out on Kincaid, how would you feel about Kraft at that spot?
Yeah, and Kraft is a good case. I think we're actually sitting down and doing projections is, worthwhile exercise because I love Tucker Kraft as a player. He's going to be entering year 3. He should be taking a step forward. So he's someone who I just kind of, if I just think about it without putting any numbers to it, like I want to be in on Tucker Kraft, but you sit down and do the projections and it's kind of tough to get him really even to tight end 13, I think, in rankings, unless you think the Packers are going to pass it a whole lot more than they did this past season. And it's tough to project that with Josh Jacobs back for this team. Green Bay ended up being one of the run heaviest offenses in the NFL last season. So, Tucker Kraft, he had a 14.5% target share. That still only equated to 70 targets for Tucker Kraft in a full 17 game season. I think he's going to need either Green Bay to throw it a lot more, or he's going to have to boost that target share up into the 18 to 20% range if he's really going to deliver in fantasy. If you're just comparing Kincaid and Kraft, I would rather have Dalton Kincaid in 2025.
Yeah, I think I would too. There's also I guess more of a pedigree there. Although Kraft did more in 2024. Let's wrap this segment up. I want to go not totally rapid fire, but semi rapid fire on 3 young quarterbacks here. Bo Nix apparently was playing through transverse process fractures in his back. He was playing with fractures in his back, Jared, from carrying that Denver offense. Nobody can do that as well as Bo Nix did. I'll be honest with you. I was not in on this guy. I did not expect him to have the season he did, and he crushed it. Whether that was collegiate experience, whether that was Sean Payton as his head coach, he was awesome. Made Cortland Sutton relevant again for the second straight year. Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims were making some big time plays in December and January as well. And this all without a successful running game, I think, too. It was really impressive with Bo Nix. Right now, if you want to invest and be in business with Nix, you're going to have to pay up much more so this year than you did last year. He's quarterback 14 right now at that 9-10 turn. Is it wheels up for Nix? Is he going to have a sophomore slump? How are the DraftSharks projections currently looking at Bo Nix in Denver?
Yeah, just comparing him to another guy we've already talked about, I think I'd rather have Drake May. And again, that's assuming the Patriots make at least one significant addition to the pass catching core. And of course, Denver could too. And I think Nix does have Sean Payton in his corner. Like that's, and he's a good player. He was super impressive. I do think Payton had a lot to do with his success. You look at Payton's history. I know a lot of it was with Drew Brees, but I mean, Payton's offense has pretty consistently produced, strong fantasy production from the quarterback spot. So that's working in Nix's favor. He's another guy that, man, this rookie quarterback class was just so awesome, both from a real life and fantasy perspective. But Nix is another guy, 430 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Like he's gonna continue to add fantasy value with his legs. I don't think that's going away. He actually did do some designed run stuff a lot more than someone like Drake May did. So I think quarterback 14 is okay. I'm not like super excited to draft him at that price, but I definitely wouldn't be against it if he's at the top of your board. You're looking for a quarterback. I think Nix is fine at that cost.
A guy who is polarizing this year, as we sit January 30th, 2025. I don't want to get too wrapped up in this, but Anthony Richardson is going to be working with biometric expert Chris Hess. And if that name sounds familiar, he was the guy who worked with Josh Allen when Josh Allen was like throwing buckshot coming out of a quarterback of Wyoming, got him to really rein stuff in. I like Richardson's deep ball, but the problem is only Dorian Thompson-Robinson was more inaccurate on passes between 0 and 10 yards last season than Anthony Richardson. This is good. We love to see this. We know that the Colts, there's rumors that they might be in on Justin Fields. Clearly, the Colts are not just going to give the starting job to Anthony Richardson. But knowing that he's working with Hess, knowing that he's going to face stiff competition, is this the time to buy an Anthony Richardson when you can get him as quarterback 15 in the mid-10th round, knowing that we just don't know if he's going to be the quarterback? I would imagine if they name him the starter, his ADP is going to shoot up, though, Jared.
It will. Quarterback 15 is not cheap enough for me. I think that's not baking in. Like I think Richardson is an underdog to be the Colts starter for the entire season. I'm sure most people would. I think most people would agree with that. Like he's not even a lock to be the week 1 starter, and then if he is, he's going to need to improve as a passer a ton to hang on to that job. The Colts have already shown they're willing to bench him, and I'm assuming they're going to have someone better in that room than Joe Flacco in 2025. It seems like that's their plan. So Richardson, just the 3rd quarterback since 2000 to have 250 plus pass attempts in a season with a sub 50% completion rate. The other 2 guys were Tim Tebow and Achilles Smith.
Wolf.
And those two guys just they didn't have an NFL career as a starter after they had that season with 250 plus pass attempts and a sub 50% completion rate. So I know it's early in Richardson's career. I know he's on the young side, even for a guy entering his 3rd season. I know he was an inexperienced college player, but I feel like this is like a make or break year for his career. If he does not improve significantly as a passer, I think his days as an NFL starter, it's going to be tough for him to, earn an opportunity again.
And, the guy going right behind him in ADP is Drake May. So give up Anthony Richardson in favor of Drake May for sure. Okay. Yep. Last quarterback I want to bring up. He's going as quarterback 27 right now in the mid 14th round of the FFPC Never Too Early tournament. Minnesota Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah says that J.J. McCarthy is back on the field. He is training and he is throwing the rock, which is good. How are you handling, we don't need to talk about all the Vikings projections because we don't know what they're doing at running back either. But how are you handling McCarthy? Are you projecting him as the week 1 starter? Are you projecting him as a guy who's going to come in later in the season? How are you handling him?
Yeah, we have McCarthy projected to play the entire season at this point. I feel pretty confident in that. I don't think Darnold will be back with the Vikings for 2025. They obviously spent the 1st round pick on McCarthy, and by all accounts, like he was on his way to, if not winning the week 1 job, like getting under center pretty quickly for the Vikings this past year. He was off to a strong start in training camp and even the brief preseason action he had. And listen, I wasn't like a huge McCarthy guy as a prospect coming into the league last year. I don't care that much, man. Just that Kevin O'Connell offense with those weapons. I mean, we saw Nick Mullins put up big fantasy games in that offense a couple of years ago. There were a couple other, subpar NFL quarterbacks that put up nice numbers in that passing game. So, and McCarthy's another guy. He can run too. He's going to add value with his legs as well. So, quarterback 27 he's at right now. Is that what you said?
Yes.
ADP? I mean, I think he's one of the better value picks among quarterbacks at that price tag. I think the only risk is that he's not their week 1 starter, and I think the odds of that are pretty slim.
At this point, I mean, like I can almost, without even looking at the DraftSharks rankings, I can almost guarantee you, viewers, McCarthy will not be the quarterback 27 for DraftSharks this year. So yeah, that does scream value. And you think about the ability to throw to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and then maybe throw an Ashton Genty in there too. Ooh, that could be really, really good. He's one of the polarizing players for drafting this season. Let's talk about a bunch more of them in the next segment. I want to talk about Joe Burrow. I want to talk about Rashee Rice versus Xavier Worthy. Let's talk about Derrick Henry, another year older, but in a really good offense. He's Jared Smola from DraftSharks. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
If you want to play Dynasty, if you haven't played yet, it's hard to like get a good league together of people, like buddies or whatever, and then say, oh, everyone's going to pay and everyone's going to pay attention. Usually you can get like 7 people that actually care, and the rest are fill-ins, and they mess up the whole league because they don't want to trade. They don't pay attention, right? So if you're looking for a serious place to play, go to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more, and you can go over there and you can either do a startup draft where you draft in from scratch, draft in a brand new team, rookies, everything included, or you can adopt an orphan team where you go in and take a team that somebody gave up on, and that's a lot of fun because you separate the players you like from the ones you don't, and now you got a bunch of trade chips and pieces, and that's a true measure of how good of a fantasy player you are if you can take one of these orphan teams and battle back to win, man. So, yeah, FFPC, really cool place to play. There you go, right there. You can use the QR code, get set up. It also supports the show. So if you're looking for a place to play and want to support me, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more, and you can play best ball, you can play Dynasty. And if you're a Fantasy Alarm member, just hit me up in the Discord on Coop's Corner and post your team. Whatever. I say this all the time. I'm like, you have direct access to me. Go to Coop's Corner in the Discord as a Fantasy Alarm member, and we can talk about whatever. We can talk about, watches, shoes, sunglasses, whatever you want to talk about. But I like talking about football mostly. And you can post your new team in there and I'll fix it up, right? I'll help you with it and we'll win some money together. It'll be a good time. So use promo code COOP, myffpc, and get set up now at fantasyalarm.com in the Discord. Let's go.
It is Dynasty Orphan season, and you can definitely pick up any number of Dynasty Orphans over at the Fantasy Football Players Championship at myffpc.com right now. The entry fees range from $77 to $5,000. However, many of them have been discounted already for 2025. 1,800 plus leagues over the last decade and a half. Not a single one has folded. Myffpc.com is where to go for that. We've been talking a lot of redraft talk on the show tonight with Jared Smola from DraftSharks. I'm Eric Balkman, HSFF show on BSN. And if you want to put this advice, this content to good use, join the FFPC Superflex Best Ball Tournament or Best Ball, Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament right now, which is going on. These drafts are going to go all the way until April 24th, the first day of the NFL draft. Then they'll stop, and you are going to be competing for a $40,000 grand prize or a $10,000 grand prize, depending upon if you join the Classic one or the Superflex Best Ball Tournament. You could draft now with 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, or 6-hour clocks. At myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go. Jared, one of the things I've always looked at in my quarterbacks for fantasy is I want them to be able to run. Like, I want legs for my quarterback. We've been talking about Drake May. We've been talking about Bo Nix, these guys, and J.J. McCarthy, who we just got done talking about. These guys are going to be able to run. That's sort of a prerequisite for being on one of Balky's fantasy football teams. However, Joe Burrow, not exactly the most exciting guy when it comes to rushing the football. And yet he had a baller season last year, reminiscent maybe of his LSU season with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. He gets Chase the Triple Crown. And now Joe Burrow, a guy who we're very worried about the wrist coming into last season, or at least I was. Now he is ascended all the way to quarterback 5 at the 411. Is that too low? Should he be worth a top 3 pick in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament? How do you look at Joe Burrow's season in 2024 and try to figure out what he's going to do this year?
Yeah, you know what's crazy about Burrow, and I didn't even realize this until I started digging into the Bengals for projections. I look at expected fantasy points a lot, and if you're not familiar, it just takes all the players' volume where it came on the field. So, like, for example, a pass from the opponent's 10-yard line is worth a lot more expected fantasy points from a pass from your own 10-yard line because the transfer touchdown is higher. Joe Burrow led all quarterbacks in expected fantasy points per game, despite hardly not running at all. That's just how strong the pass volume was really for him, right? Like, we know this is the pass heaviest offense in the NFL. They run a ton of plays, which helps as well. So that's how you get the expected points. And then Burrow, an elite passer with last year, one elite wide receiver in Jamar Chase and another really strong wide receiver in T. Higgins. So, like, it's hard for a non-mobile quarterback to score as a top 3 passer in this day and age. And I don't think we'll have Burrow ranked as a top 3 quarterback. But I mean, if anyone can do it, it'd be him. Now, to me, the T. Higgins thing matters for Joe Burrow, obviously, right? If you look at last year, we got 12 games of Joe Burrow with T. Higgins and 5 without. 23.9 fantasy points per game with T. Higgins. That was quarterback 2. 21.0 points per game without T. Higgins. So that's what, two fewer points per game, basically. 21 points per game would be quarterback 4 on the season. So it's not like he tanked without T. Higgins, but it made a difference. So that, I think that's the key thing for Burrow. If T. Higgins departs, which if you made me guess right now, I still think he ends up playing elsewhere. I think I think another team will just be able to make a bigger monetary offer to T. Higgins, and I think he ends up playing elsewhere. If that's the case, I think quarterback 5 is definitely where Burrow belongs. If Higgins comes back, I think you could make a case to, maybe push him ahead of a Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels. I think you got to take Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen 1, 2, but I think you could possibly push Burrow to quarterback 3 if he gets Higgins back.
If I made you pick one team that T. Higgins is going to play for today, if you had to make your call today, is it New England? Where do you think he would be?
Yeah, I just have a gut feel he's going to end up with New England. I don't have there's nothing connecting him to New England that I've heard, but I just think it makes so much sense from both sides, right? Like, your T. Higgins, you get to be the clear number 1 and play with a talented young quarterback in Drake May. And of course, if you're New England, I mean, there's no team that needs a true number one wide receiver more. So I think it just makes a ton of sense for both sides. And New England has the cap space to get it done.
New England has whiffed so much on day 1 and day 2 receivers. I think Belichick kind of just started doing that in his last, 5-6 years there. Hey, I can't draft these guys. Let's just go sign them, which is what they did. Randy Moss, Brandon Lloyd, Wes Welker or whatever. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. One of my favorite quarterbacks to draft last year was Jared Goff. Mostly because of the draft capital. I didn't have to invest a whole lot into it. And then another huge chunk of that was the surrounding cast in Detroit was awesome. And you knew the Lions were going to do numbers, and they did do numbers. However, he has ascended to quarterback 8 this year. He is not going to have Ben Johnson this season. How repeatable, and I guess we don't need a carbon copy of what Goff did last year, but is he to put up enough numbers? Is he going to do enough with the Lions to warrant a mid-7th round pick, to warrant being the 8th quarterback selected off the board?
It's funny. You actually do need a carbon copy of last year because quarterback 8 is where he finished last year. So he's going where he finished last year. He's like a classic case of like likely regression. You look at the efficiency stuff. He averaged 8.6 yards per attempt. Goff did last year. First 3 seasons in Detroit, 6.6, 7.6, 7.6. So a full yard higher than he was the previous 2 seasons. A 6.9% touchdown rate for Goff last year. That's astronomically high. The league average is like in the low 4s. Anything in the mid to high 5s is a really high touchdown rate. He was at 6.9. He had a 4.6% touchdown rate over his first 3 seasons in Detroit. So that's even before factoring in Ben Johnson's departure. I think you have to expect some decline in efficiency for Jared Goff. So, and if you just again, going back to expected points per game, he was 18th in expected points per game. So if he was totally average as far as efficiency, and I don't think he's going to fall to those, depths this year. I think he'll remain above average in terms of efficiency. But I think, again, our final quarterback rankings aren't set yet. To me, I would guess he's going to land somewhere between quarterback 12 and quarterback 15 in our initial quarterback rankings.
Can you think of a bigger regression candidate at quarterback this year than Jared Goff? Is there somebody out there that you say, okay, yeah, Goff is going to regress, but this guy's going to be even more of a regression? Or is Goff number one for you?
I would assume he's number one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like Baker Mayfield's another guy who easily outproduced what he should have done based on, his usage. But even Baker, like at least he runs. And he lost his coordinator too, so that's a decent comparison. And of course, Baker, we got to see about Chris Godwin as well. I mean, Baker Mayfield's another guy who. And what's Baker? Where's he going in FFPC drafts right now?
Right ahead of Goff. He's quarterback 7.
Okay. I would rather have Baker than Goff. I think if you ask me right now, but I think quarterback 7's kind of rich for Baker as well.
He's only 3 picks ahead of Goff right now, 704 versus 707 right now. Yeah. Another quarterback who has much lower draft capital. This is a good bounce back. We talked about him at the top of the show in the Brian Schottenheimer news. Is Dak Prescott. Jared, you got to go all the way to quarterback 18 to find Dak Prescott on this list at the 1107. He's going behind C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Brock Purdy. And obviously others behind him right now. He's right ahead of Tua Tagovailoa. Given Schottenheimer, given that he's going to have CeeDee Lamb again this year, I don't want to say he's going to be 2023 Dak Prescott, but quarterback 18 seems low.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I know I said J.J. McCarthy might be the best value in drafts right now. Dak Prescott might be the second best value. We said quarterback 6 in points per game with Schottenheimer in 2023. He obviously wasn't nearly as good last year. What I like though is that in Dak Prescott games last year, the Cowboys remained super pass heavy. They were also first in offensive pace in those games with Dak Prescott. They were running plays at the fastest rate. That we love that for fantasy. More plays equals more fantasy points, of course. So there are obviously concerns with Dak Prescott. For me, it's one, what do they do at wide receiver behind CeeDee Lamb? Because they have nothing there right now. 2, I will say this, Dak Prescott, if you look at basically any efficiency metric from last year, it was one of the worst years of his career. So he, beyond the other issues in Dallas, it wasn't his best season. Now he's still, I think he's is he like 31, maybe 32. Like he's still at an age where I think he'll bounce back. Maybe not to like peak Dak Prescott levels, but I would expect him to be better this season. And again, he quarterback 18, and even at this point of the offseason when I'm drafting too, I at some point you have to think about safety in having a job, right? And like quarterback 18, like we know Dak Prescott's going to be the Cowboys starter. So if nothing else, at quarterback 18, you're getting a guy who is going to be starting for his team. And in these early drafts, especially, my biggest issue used to be in these drafts, we used to take too many swings in these early drafts. And by the time it got to August, I'd look at these rosters and I'd have like 4 or 5 guys on a team that I just knew were going to give me like close to 0. Right. Yeah. Like I do think there's there's more value in safety in drafts in, January and February, just getting guys who, are going to be on the field. And I think that's Dak Prescott. He is the Cowboys starter as long as he's healthy this season. So quarterback 18, there's really not much downside to him.
Yeah, especially at best ball too. I mean, these are obviously both best
exactly.
ball tournaments. When we have, main event stuff or mid stakes contests, when those launch, I mean, obviously you can fix those mistakes to a certain degree, I guess. You can't fully fix them. But at least you can make changes on your roster. But man, once the season starts, this is who you're rolling with. A guy that I've loved rolling with pretty much for his whole career has been Amon-Ra St. Brown. We keep coming back to this Lions offense that won't have Ben Johnson. I don't necessarily think it really matters who the OC is when it comes to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a first-round pick right now, late first-round pick in the FFPC Never Too Early tournament. Jared, how many receivers should be going ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown? I only ask this because I need to tell Amon-Ra, so he memorizes these guys that were all drafted ahead of him in fantasy this year. So he's well aware of the chip that needs to be on his shoulder for 2025.
Yeah, I better be careful here, but I mean, to me, and I think late round 1 is where he belongs. To me, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, that's a clear top 3 for me among wide receivers. Going back to Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb's my wide receiver 4 right now, and then to me it's Amon-Ra, kind of in a tier I think with Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors. I think I'd probably lean Amon-Ra among those 3. It'd be Amon-Ra or Nico for me, I think. But I think he belongs in that tier. He's awesome. But losing Ben Johnson's gonna hurt. I don't think the offense is not going to tank. I think it's still going to be a top 10 offense for sure, probably a top 5 offense. My one slight concern with Amon-Ra St. Brown is we've seen the target share decline a bit over the last couple seasons. So in 2023, he had a 28.4% target share. That dropped to 25.6% last year. So with 3 percentage points. And then if you look at the second half of the season, once Jameson Williams returned from his suspension, Jameson Williams seemed to cut into Amon-Ra St. Brown's volume a bit. St. Brown's target share over the last 9 games, 24.6%. So about a percentage point lower than it was over the course of the entire season. So, part of the argument I think for Amon-Ra St. Brown heading into drafts this past year was that he could be this 28 to 30% target share guy. I don't think that's within the realm of possibility anymore when you talk about Jameson Williams being there along with Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs, but the efficiency is still going to be there with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I think he's going to see enough volume. Again, I think late round 1 is where he should be going in drafts.
And he is wide receiver 5 right now, behind Chase Jefferson, Lamb, Nakua, and then St. Brown at the 110 right now. He's basically it's a huge glut of receivers between the 109 and the 202. And make sure I'm saying this right. Yeah, there's 5 receivers going between the 109 and the 202 with Nakua, St. Brown, Collins, Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. And then you go to the 207 with AJ Brown. Now, I want to bring this up because Collins, this is surface fantasy football analysis here. And this is how I'm setting this question up. Nico Collins played on a team. Now, granted, he missed some time this year, but he played on an offense that I think fell well short of expectations, not only for fantasy players, but for the Texans themselves this year, as Bobby Slowick is out as offensive coordinator. And Collins is going at the 111. AJ Brown is going at the 207. So you're looking at 8 picks later, 2/3 of a round later. And AJ Brown plays on a team that's in the Super Bowl right now that had really good offensive performances this year. Obviously, a big part of that was Saquon Barkley chewing up yardage and points, but AJ Brown's the number 1 receiver on that team. For you, it sounds like you're still drafting Collins over AJ Brown as well. Why is that? Why do you like Collins better than Brown for 2025, Jared?
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing is that the Texans threw 122 more passes than the Eagles did last year. Like we talked about it a few minutes ago, like how important volume is in fantasy football. There's just, and I do think I'm going to be projecting the Eagles to throw it a bit more this coming. I mean, they were just so good. They finished 15-2, 14-3. I don't remember what their record was, but like they're probably going to be trailing a bit more in 2025, which will lead to some more passing. But I think we can safely say the Texans are going to throw up more than the Eagles in 2025. And I think you look at target shares, I think AJ Brown and Nico Collins are going to be pretty similar as far as that goes. And even talent wise, I mean, AJ Brown's awesome. I think Nico Collins is right there with him as a pure talent. I think Nico Collins is that good. And even you look at, start to look at where these guys are in their careers, like Nico should still be on the ascent. And AJ Brown, we're not worried about him declining yet, but he's probably like at least at his peak at this point where he's not going to be getting better. So just kind of trying to get ahead of that. I do think those price tags on Nico and AJ Brown in drafts, I think they're about right. I do think Nico deserves to be going pretty safely ahead of AJB.
And we will get to see Mr. Brown play in the Super Bowl, not this Sunday, but the following Super Bowl, or the following week for the Super Bowl. Maybe he'll be in the next Super Bowl as well. I don't know. But the team he's going to be facing features a pretty talented rookie receiver in Xavier Worthy. The de facto number 1 receiver for Patrick Mahomes on this team down the stretch over Marquise Brown, over DeAndre Hopkins. When we look towards 2025 drafts, we have to remember the monkey wrench that's thrown into the equation of Rashee Rice coming back to take targets and catches away from Xavier Worthy. Now, right now, if I look at the ADP on these guys for the never too early drafts, I see Rashee Rice at wide receiver 19 at the 402. I have to go down to wide receiver 33 at the 604 to find Xavier Worthy. So we're looking at a little over 2 rounds, and we're looking at 14 receivers separating Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Number 1, who's better? Who puts up the better numbers in 2025, Jared? That's the first part. And then the second part of the question, if it is Rice, is the juice still worth the squeeze to draft him 2+ rounds ahead of Worthy?
Yeah, I want both those guys at cost right now. You're getting what I think are two super talented wide receivers on a Patrick Mahomes led offense that we know is going to be pass heavy. And we'll see if Travis Kelce's even playing football next year. If he is, I think his decline is going to continue. So I think there's going to be plenty of targets available. I'm curious to see how Rice and Worthy coexist next year, because Xavier Worthy, what mostly changed for him from the first 2/3 of the season to the final third where he started producing for fantasy. They started using him a lot closer to the line of scrimmage. It was a lot of deep shots early in the season, and we know those deep shots were not connecting. He was open a lot of time; they just weren't connecting. But he almost, I'm not going to say he was in the Rashee Rice role late in the season, but he was closer to the Rashee Rice role where it was more of the short yardage run after catch stuff. So I'm curious to see how they coexist. I still think Rice, when he plays next year, that of course is the big question with Rashee Rice, because he's recovering from the injury, and the injury ended up being, it was an LCL and a hamstring injury. So there was no damage to the ACL. He should be, I think the timetable on him was 3 to 4 months. And that was an injury that happened in September. So he should be, ready for most of the offseason and back to 100% well before week 1. But then we have the, looming suspension for Rashee Rice as well. I think we should be expecting a 4 to 6 game suspension for Rashee Rice to open next season. So that's the concern with him. I think, to me, on a per game basis, I think Rice is the guy you want here. I think you look at, he had a 31.5% target share in his 3 full games to open this season, after having a 24% target share over his final 10 games of 2023. So, he's been the target earner. I think he's going to continue to be the wide receiver 1 in Kansas City once he's healthy, and that suspension's behind him. And on a per game basis, I think he's going to pretty easily beat wide receiver 19. I think he's probably a top 12 fantasy wide receiver once he's back next season. So I think wide receiver 19 is kind of correctly baking in that suspension stuff into his draft costs. And then Worthy, I think he can pay off wide receiver 33 as well, because I do think, first round pick, fastest guy in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes led offense. Well, again, we'll see how his usage kind of evolves as we go through next season alongside Rashee Rice. That'll be something the Chiefs have to figure out. But I'm gonna bet on Andy Reid figuring that out. I'm gonna bet on Patrick Mahomes figuring that out, and just sort of bet on the talent with Worthy.
In the projections for DraftSharks currently, Jared, how big of a suspension are you baking into Rice's numbers?
I give him 5 games, just splitting it right down the middle, because I do think 4 to 6, just based on the personal conduct policy and what we've seen from the NFL in other cases, not necessarily similar to this, but other off-field stuff. I think it tends to be 4 to 6 games. So I think we're going to open our projection with Rice missing the first 5 games of the season.
Guys like Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy being the receivers that will carry Patrick Mahomes over receivers that we have seen and enjoyed on our fantasy teams, like DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown for years. It's a bit of a changing of the guard there. Another changing of the guard could be happening in Los Angeles with Cooper Kupp right now. Cooper Kupp is going at the 10:01 right now, wide receiver 49. It's the lowest we've seen him maybe since his rookie year, maybe even not even in his rookie year. This could be the lowest he's ever gone. And when I look at Kupp being drafted there, it's still difficult for me to take a home run swing on a player of his age and injury history. However, if I wait 20 more receivers, if I wait 5 more rounds, Jared, there's a second-year player named Jordan Whittington who just happens to be playing on the same team as Kupp. Are we drafting these guys in the correct order? Should we still be drafting Kupp over Whittington? And the other thing that we have to throw into this equation, are the Rams going to be set with those 3 guys as their top 3 receivers, those 2 and then Nakua for the Rams this season?
I mean, is Cooper Kupp going to be back in LA? I think that's not a lock. Is Matt Stafford going to be back in LA? I think that's not a lock. I mean, I think there's questions we need answered from the Rams. Cooper Kupp is, man, I want to be out on Cooper Kupp, but we talked about these drafters being sharp. Like the fact that he's, what do you say? Is he's going to the 10th round? Is it wide receiver 50 something?
Wide receiver 49.
And how he closed this season is terrifying. Like he he was on the field still, but he was not drawing targets, not producing anything. He was awful. Cooper Kupp was also the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football through week 12 this past season. Like through week 12, Jamar Chase was the only wide receiver with more PPR points per game than Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, I get he was horrible down the stretch, but that was like a 6-7 game sample. Like I think it makes some sense to take some shots on him. You don't need him to bounce back to what he was. You need him to bounce back to, being a viable number 2 wide receiver in this Sean McVay offense that's always been wide receiver friendly. I think Kupp, I don't know. I have more thinking to do on Cooper Kupp. Again, I kind of wanted to just be totally out on him, but at that price tag, I don't think I can be. And then Jordan Whittington is interesting. I mean, he was a late round pick. I think was he a 6th rounder last year? Like,
yeah,
nothing about his prospect profile coming into the league to get like super excited about. But then the Rams draft him, which always gets your attention, right? Because they've plucked these guys like Cooper Kupp and like Puka Nacua. And then he really, like Whittington, he didn't play a lot this past year, but when he did play, he was very efficient. 2.46 yards per route run for Whittington. That was easily second on the Rams, behind Puka Nacua, but well ahead of Cooper Kupp and the rest of those guys. So, and he does have that, run after catch ability that this Rams passing game loves. So I see why McVay liked him. He's a bigger body. The Rams wide receivers, they have to be willing to block in the run game. So he makes sense as a McVay wide receiver. And I do think if he gets the opportunity, and honestly, it might take Kupp being elsewhere in 2025 for Whittington to, really break out and be this, fantasy viable guy that we can, potentially throw into fantasy lineups. But he's definitely someone I have my eye on as we go through this offseason.
The most recent reports state that Stafford does intend to play this season. However, he's probably going to need a new contract. With a new contract, even though he's under contract with the Rams for not only this season, but next season, that requires more money. How do the Rams get more money? They could move on from Kupp. They could save more than $20 million over the next 2 seasons if they do cut him now. It's a $29 million cap hit, $22 million in dead money. And Kupp already said, yeah, I want to play. I just don't know if it's going to be with the Rams. So that could be a parting of ways there too. And it could be the Nacua Whittington show, or maybe somebody else. God, the Rams could just draft, like you said, anybody on day 3 and turn them into something huge. You never know.
Yeah. And I do think, I do think if you're betting on a Kupp bounce back, you want him staying with the Rams.
Oh,
right?
totally.
I'm not saying Kupp was like a product of the McVay offense, but again, you want to be in the McVay offense as a wide receiver. We've seen it just produce, go back to Robert Woods and the guys, Brandon Cooks, it produces fantasy points. If you're betting on Kupp to bounce back, I think staying in LA is the best case scenario.
And not only that, but just the relationship and the chemistry he's built up with Matthew Stafford all these years. I mean, that plays into it as well. Great offense, good quarterback. Yeah, that is the solution, the recipe for Cooper Kupp goodness in 2025. Let's touch on New England. I hate to do this. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. Jalen Polk. Can we already label him a bust, Jared, or is it too soon? Obviously, with Drake May setting up for what should be a very fun and exciting and profitable year for him. I was already kind of out on Polk, given how, if you looked at how that Washington offense was structured, he was really good when McMillan got hurt. But when McMillan was playing, Polk was just kind of the third guy. And then New England drafts him. So that's red flag number 2 in my rookie draft. Oh, New England took him? Yeah, I kind of want to be out on this guy. Is he already a bust? How do you feel about Polk for 2025? Yeah,
I'm definitely with you. I didn't like him nearly as high as he got drafted. McMillan just flat out outproduced him in 2022 when McMillan was healthy. It sure looks like McMillan's going to end up being the better pro. I mean, we never want to speak in absolutes, especially with a wide receiver going into a second season. But I think there's a good chance Polk is a bust, and someone you could cut from dynasty rosters now and not ever regret it. I spent way too much time earlier this week when I was doing Patriots projections, just like looking into how bad Polk's rookie season was. My favorite thing I found was, so he averaged 0.35 yards per route last year. That was the single lowest mark among any wide receiver with 30 plus targets since PFF started tracking yards per route in 2006. there were only 6 other wide receivers who even finished with under 0.5 yards per route in a season. Those 6, and these are some great names. These other 6 wide receivers: Kamar Aiken, Brashad Perriman, Kenny Britt, Mike Thomas, Bryant Johnson, and Darius Hayward Bay. Those are the guys that Polk's name now belongs with after that 2024 season he had.
Yeah, Polk and Permar bringing this up too. All rookies in the NFL must show something in their rookie season. Polk just did not. And you know what? That name just sounds like it fits right in with the rest of those,
doesn't it? It does.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm guilty of this. I did not realize what a baller season Derrick Henry had. I know he was great. I know he was fantastic. I did not realize he was 79 yards away, Jared, from a 2,000-yard rushing season. Everybody talked about Barkley, but we forgot all about Henry. He got into the end zone 16 times, and oh, by the way, he caught 19 passes this year as well. Derrick Henry is coming into, I want to say, his age 31 season. Don't quote me on that. It's 31 or 32. And normally, we're giving him, I talked about the McCaffrey rule. Like, you want to make a special exception for him bouncing back. Normally, I'm not interested in any running back, age 28 and up. He's going to be 31, 32, whatever it is. And yet we have to want to take a long, hard look at what we're doing with him in drafts. FFPC players have him at running back 5 at the 203 right now. Are you also betting on another big year from Henry in Baltimore?
It's funny. We talked earlier about how just fantasy players have gotten sharper because of, all these analytics we have and just the content and all the information. I think Henry's one case where getting sharper made us wrong on Derrick Henry. Cause like 10 years ago, Derrick Henry joins the Ravens. I'm drafting that guy. This is really good running back joining an awesome running game, an awesome offense. He's going to have all this touchdown opportunity. I think we kind of overthought it with Derrick Henry. I mean, I'm done betting against Derrick Henry. Like if he has another big season this year at age 31, 32, he'd be an outlier. He's already an outlier though. What he did this past year, what he's really done the past 2-3 years at his age, he's already an outlier. So those normal, aging curves we have for running backs obviously don't apply for Derrick Henry. You look at, of course, being in Baltimore helped him last year, but you look at some of the like offensive independent efficiency metrics. We look at yards after contact per attempt, rush yards over expected per attempt, just no drop off at all from Derrick Henry from, what he had been doing the previous few years. So it does not look like he's in decline at all. Again, I don't want to bet against them, but that said, running back 5 that's freaking pricey for a guy who's just not going to catch passes, right? I mean, even Saquon Barkley didn't catch a lot of balls in Philly, but even he caught, I'd have to look at the numbers, but probably twice as many passes, if not more, than Derrick Henry did this past year. So I'm not betting against them. Am I gonna have a lot of Derrick Henry at RB5 though? I probably not.
Henry did. It would have been 4 weeks ago. He just turned 31. So this will be his age 31 season. Saquon Barkley last season for the Eagles ended up what I say with Derrick Henry. He caught 19 passes. Saquon Barkley last year caught 33 for the Eagles. He also got in the end zone a couple of times too. So the thing is, I have always shied away from Henry, and it's so wild, Jared, as this guy gets older and proves it more. I'm more likely to take him now. Like at the end, like the worst time to take him when he's this old. But I didn't see anything from him in this past season that suggests to me that he's ready to fall off a cliff. I didn't see it, and maybe I want to be in business with him at that price.
He seems like one of those guys that's just he's gonna be dominant until he just decides to retire. He's gonna play to his 34. He's gonna have a big season at 34. Then he's just gonna say, "I'm out of here."
Yeah, the Barry Sanders effect. Although Sanders didn't play that late in his career, but he's just like, I'm good. We can call it. I don't have Brian Thomas Jr. on the rundown, but Vic Z posted on YouTube, the YouTube chat tonight. He's in a 14-team dynasty league. He has the opportunity to trade. Well, I don't know which side of this is on, but one side is getting Brian Thomas Jr. The other side is getting the 106 and 107, I assume in the rookie draft. To me, it's elite talent over everything else. Glenn Lowy, longtime FFPC high stakes player, told me that in an interview I had with him many years ago. I've held that. That's the way I manage my dynasty teams. Brian Thomas Jr. is elite talent. Like I'm not parting with him for 2 first rounders.
No, I mean me either. I mean, if you threw the 101 in the mix, I would
That's
obviously
different.
consider it.
That's different. Yeah.
And I was gonna say, even I think if you gave me like 102 and 106, I'd start to consider. I'm not even sure I would do that, but I do think you talked about, like, to me, Tat McMillan's the 102 at this point. If you give me that plus the 106 for BTJ, I would consider it. I still think I'd probably lean towards BTJ at that point, but 106 and 107 is not nearly enough for me to trade away BTJ.
I don't have Tet McMillan on here, but let's talk about him in the next segment, because this is a guy I could go either way on, and I think now I'm leaning the other way than where you're leaning. So you're probably going to sell me on him in the next segment. But the other thing I want to bring up here, Permar99 wants to know, and I think it's kind of an open and shut case right now. The Saints are the only team that has not hired a head coach yet. I assume they're waiting for after the Super Bowl, and then Kellen Moore is going to step in, and he's going to be the coach there. He wants to know, again, another aging running back here, a guy I tried to sell in my dynasty leagues last year. I could not get any good value for him, so I kept him, and I was pretty happy with Alvin Kamara and what he was able to do. But what about him with Kellen Moore in New Orleans? Because it seems like this is what's going to happen for the Saints.
Yeah, and I was all the way out on Kamara in redraft last year, despite my own projections telling me I should take him. I spent like all of August trying to get Kamara down our rankings, just because the projection, just because, again, when you feed someone that much of volume, which we had him projected for, it's kind of tough for you to fail. And Kamara led all running backs in expected PPR points per game last year. He had the most valuable role in fantasy football among running backs. So I'm kind of like you with Henry. I'm kind of back in on Kamara this year after being out on him last year. I just think, again, we'll see what they do in the backfield, but I think we kind of know he's going to dominate the pass catching work, and especially if Derek Carr is still quarterback there, we know how much he loves to check down. I just think Kamara's he's gonna see too many targets to really disappoint.
He is going to be 30, is Kamara, in July. But again, a guy who he's absorbed some hits, but I think of him more as a space player than anything else. So I think that the wear and tear on his body is not as much as it was on, like, say, Derrick Henry or somebody like that at age 30. Not that it affected Henry at all either, but he's an alien. Jonathan Taylor, if you have him in redraft or dynasty, are you better off not having Anthony Richardson as the starting quarterback for Indianapolis? I always say, Jared, and I don't really have any good stats to back this up. I know you probably crunched the numbers on this. I never like having running backs on my team that have their quarterback being able to use their legs proficiently. Now there's exceptions to that. Derrick Henry is a huge exception to that in Baltimore last year. But by and large, if your quarterback can run, he's probably going to be doing that after he gets through his progressions, rather than dumping off to a running back for some cheap PPR points. So for that reason, I would be hoping that a pocket passer like Flacco, who was there last year, not necessarily Joe Flacco, but a player like that who can dump off to Taylor, I would prefer that for Jonathan Taylor in 2025. Is that the way you see it as well?
Yeah, I think so. And the numbers from last year bear that out. We have 9 games last year of Jonathan Taylor with Richardson and 5 games with Joe Flacco. Jonathan Taylor averaged a lot more actual fantasy points per game and expected fantasy points per game with Joe Flacco. Actually, Jonathan Taylor in those 5 games with Flacco, he was the RB1 in PPR points per game. I know a lot of that was that massive game he had late in the season against the Giants, I believe, right? That kind of boosted that up. But even if you just look at usage, his usage was a lot more valuable with Flacco, and a couple of reasons for that. One, like you said, the targets, 3.8 targets per game with Joe Flacco, 1.3 targets per game with Anthony Richardson. So, 2.5 more targets per game with Flacco. And then the touchdown opportunity as well. For starters, the offense is just better with Joe Flacco, so that leads to more scoring opportunities. But then you don't have Anthony Richardson, vulturing those goal line carries when he's out of the game. So really, it's a win-win on both the rushing and receiving fronts for Jonathan Taylor. If, like you said, Eric, they get some more immobile pocket passer in there for 2025.
running back 11 at the 211 right now for Jonathan Taylor. He actually is going right behind Breece Hall as the 11th running back off the board. And then if you have to wait another half round to see running back 12 and Kyron Williams. So the end of that big glut from Achane to Jonathan Taylor that starts in the second round. As of right now, in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, we have 8 running backs going in that second round. So there are a ton of them going in the second. Let's talk about David Montgomery, another running back who is not going in the second. He's going in the 6th round right now, Jared. Running back 20. Theo Greminger from Player Profiler brought this up like a month or so ago, and he said he could see people, not that he was going to be one of these people, but he could see people taking Jahmyr Gibbs at the 101. This is when Montgomery got hurt and Gibbs was expected to go on this big usage run and just crush it for fantasy players, which, by the way, he did. And he was saying recency bias, it's going to be fresh in our minds. Gibbs is going to be going at the 101. People are going to forget that Montgomery's going to be back. Okay, I get that for Gibbs, but if that's true, then wouldn't that also push David Montgomery down ADP? Is this a spot you want to be striking at, knowing that the last memory we have of Montgomery was one game against the Commanders in which they lost and they couldn't really utilize him that they wanted to because they were down most of the game. Running back 20 at the 603. Is that a nice buy for you at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like jumping over myself to get him there, but I think it's a fine price. So Montgomery, I mean, in his 13 healthy games last year, he was RB 11 in PPR points per game. Now he was RB 18 in expected PPR points per game. So he like basically every Lion outproduced what they should have done based on volume. I mean, all those guys were just super efficient. So again, there is the Ben Johnson factor here. What does that mean for the efficiency of this offense? I also wonder, does Ben Johnson departing alter the backfield usage here at all, right? Because if you look at expected fantasy points, Montgomery was right there. I think he even had more expected fantasy points than Jahmyr Gibbs in their 13 games together last year. I wonder if that changes a little. I doubt it does, though. Dan Campbell freaking loves David Montgomery, and Montgomery's still good. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs is better. He's the more dynamic player, but Montgomery, for what they ask him to do, still a very effective player. I don't think his role is going to change a whole lot. I think RB20 is about where he should be going.
This is a party foul on me, and I'm probably going to be fired for bringing up a New England Patriot for the 3rd time on this show tonight, but I'm going to bring it up. Ramondre Stevenson, arguably, perhaps maybe inarguably, the most talented player on offense that's not named Drake May among the skill guys, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. He's going to be bouncing back this year with Josh McDaniels, and I'll be honest with you, I was totally out on him. Like, I don't want Ramondre Stevenson. Then I saw his ADP. You can get him in the mid-9th right now, Jared, as running back 35. And like, say what you will about him, but at that point where he is bottom of the barrel at the running back 3, I mean, he's like a borderline 4th running back. I don't know. Maybe I can get on board with that unless we think New England's going to do something with the backfield in the draft or free agency.
I mean, that's the point I was going to bring up, is that, like, they bring in a new coaching staff, which potentially means turnover in the backfield. But remember, they gave Stevenson that big extension. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it's a 4-year, $36 million deal that he got whenever he signed that. So they kind of need to stick with him with the amount of money they're paying him. Like, there's not really room for them to make another significant addition. Now, Antonio Gibson is going to be back, and you kind of look at McDaniel's history, and he does like to use a pass catching back. So that, that'd be a concern for Stevenson, that he's going to lose some of that pass catching work to Gibson, which honestly he already did last year. So I'm not sure that would be a lot different, but to me, the biggest selling point for Stevenson is that he was really a victim of game flow last year. The Patriots were just losing so often last year. And in the Patriots' 12 losses, Stevenson scored as the RB34 in PPR points per game. In the 3 games New England won, they only won 3 games, but in those 3 games, he was the RB11 in PPR points per game. So if this team improves, if they're, a 500 team and game flow is not working against Stevenson as much as it did last season, I definitely think he could be a nice value at that ADP.
Huh. Interesting. He did not, by the way, Tom Smith, but I was just looking this up. Did Ramondre Stevenson have more fumbles than touchdowns? If you include the one receiving touchdown he had last year, no, he did not. He had 7 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown, and 7 fumbles. So it was quite a bit. We'll see what happens there. Getting back to Detroit here, I want to tackle a couple of tight ends because I think that these guys really are polarizing this year. They're polarizing last year, and they continue to be polarizing this year. Sam Laporta, on the wings of a fantastic rookie season, was drafted on average as the tight end 1 last year. I kind of stayed away from it because I knew that that's not a sticky stat, and it wasn't. I mean, Laporta did have a good season, but he did not live up to tight end 1 value. He is going right now at tight end 4. Jared, you can invest at the 408 on average to get Laporta. What kind of year is he going to have now that we know John Morton is going to be the OC? And by and large, the Lions will be bringing the band back together on offense.
Yeah, I think tight end 4 would be tough for me to pay. I think I'd rather just get the Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, or just wait on the position for some of those mid-range guys. And to me, the biggest, so if you look at what went wrong for Laporta from 2023 to 2024, the answer is basically everything. Like he suffered everywhere. He suffered in terms of volume. His target share was down from 19.8% to 16%. He suffered in terms of efficiency. You look at yards per route, 1.76 to 1.61. So just it's a bad combo when you lose volume and efficiency, right? And that's kind of what led to the disappointing season. I guess to me, the biggest argument against him at tight end 4 is you look at expected fantasy points per game last year. Laporta was tight end 12 in expected points per game.
Wow.
So like, unless you think that is going to change, or you think he's going to be super, super efficient. And I don't expect the usage to change a whole lot because Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, they're back. And it's tough to bet on him being that efficient to pay off that tight end 4 price tag.
The last thing I'll bring up with tight ends here, Travis Kelce, the lowest he's gone in seemingly since the 1980s, I want to say. Travis Kelce, tight end 9 right now at the 705. He is going behind Jonnu Smith and David Njoku right now. Can't believe that sentence just came out of my mouth, but that's the case. That's where he's going right now. Mid-7th, Jared. Travis Kelce could be all yours. If only they could play the playoffs for all 4 months of the regular season, that'd be great. Kelce, are you in or out on him at that price this season?
I'm definitely out for now because, again, I'm not even convinced he's playing football next year. And going back, I don't want to be taking zeros on these basketball teams I'm draft. So like, if we get to April and we know he's playing again, and I don't know, maybe I don't even think his ADP is going to climb that much from there. Do you? Like, if we get confirmation he's playing?
No.
Yeah. So at that point,
I would say that I could see him moving past both Smith and Njoku.
Sure.
But that's not even a full round. That's like 7 picks. But then after that, there's no way he's being drafted ahead of Andrews, Hawkinson, Laporta, Kittle, McBride, or Bowers. Like that's not going to happen. So maybe it goes up
I'll get my
bit.
shares.
I don't know. And you bring up a good point. If Kelce announces that he's coming back for 2025, I don't even know if there's a bump at all. I don't know if people. I think a lot of these never too early drafters right now are looking at this from the standpoint of like, yeah, he's coming back. He's playing next year. And maybe they shouldn't be. That's a great point. That will end the redraft portion on this. What I want to do is step out, catch our breath, get a quick drink, and then I want to get some rapid fire rookie analysis. You guys just did a mock rookie draft on DraftSharks. You and Shav and Hallam. I want to get some thoughts that you put out there on the web on certain players, and I want to lead things off with Ted McMillan because I could go either way on this guy. I want to get your thoughts on him. Jared Smola from DraftSharks joining me on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network tonight. I'm Eric Balkman. We roll on with rookie talk right after this.
World champion Ric Flair once said, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And if you want to be the man or woman this fantasy football season, you got to play over at myffpc.com. That's where all the best fantasy gamers play. That's where all the high stakes gamers play because they've got the high stakes leagues. They have the best formats. They have the best payouts. It's the place to be. And if you win a FFPC main event or a Fantasy Pros Championship contest over there, you put some serious respect on your name and some money in your pocket. Anyone can win their hometown league, right? You're probably a great fantasy gamer. Prove it. You go out and win an event like this, You can go and put in your Twitter bio or X bio, FFPC main event champion. That means something. That's definitive proof that you're one of the best fantasy gamers in the world. So go over to myffpc.com and use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. And now you're on your road to greatness, right? You could even do an online draft, or you can go and draft in Las Vegas with the stars. Draft at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC main event. That's where they're all doing it. It's awesome stuff. So get set up now so that you can be a star this year. You can be the man. Just like Ric Flair, you can be a champion. Woo!
MyFFPC.com is where to go for not only dynasty leagues, but the never too early best ball tournaments, which we've been talking a lot about tonight. There's a lot of people getting the rookie itch right now that want to delve deep into rookie analysis, and obviously dynasty orphans need a home. You can pick up any of those teams with 2025 picks this year as well. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. Many of them having reduced prices for 2025, anywhere from $77 to $5,000. Never have we ever had a dynasty league fold in 15 years. And that's over 1,800 leagues as well. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. Speaking of rookies, let's talk a little rookies with Jared Smola from DraftSharks. Jared, I know you are knee deep, elbow deep, up to your ears in redraft stuff, but I do want to pick your brain on a few of these rookie players that, quite frankly, I am a long way from making up my mind on a lot of these guys. And obviously landing spot is always huge. We won't find out that for about, another 3 months or so. Ted McMillan, I've seen a lot of mock drafts where he is either the 102 or the 103, usually the 102. A guy that, quite frankly, I don't remember. I always look at Hallam does this too. Hallam's probably got his 7-round mock done for 2027 already. But the thing with McMillan, I don't remember a whole lot about him coming into the college football season and being talked about. And yet now all of a sudden he's the top wide receiver. What do you like about McMillan that has you saying, hey, the 102 pick, not a bad pick right now?
I just look at his prospect profile and he has been he produced all 3 seasons on campus, right? He was a 5-star recruit coming to Arizona, goes for 700 yards as a true freshman, then has a little over 2,700 total yards over the past 2 years. And then, the production's there. Is the concern for you the lack of separation stuff?
Here's my lazy analysis. He reminds me of bust players, like these tall guys, these big catch radius guys that, again, they haven't had to get separation because they're so big. They just win these 50-50 balls. And then that doesn't always, I've seen that bust a lot at the NFL level.
Yeah. And trust me, no one got burned more badly on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside than I did. So I definitely have some PTSD off of, contested catch winner busting in the NFL. I think, and I've watched some McMillan, and just from what I've seen and what I've read, I think for a big guy, I do think he's going to be able to create enough separation. I think a good comp for him, like play style wise, is Drake London. I think they're going to be similar as pros, but really with McMillan at this point in the process, for me, it's the production is there, and it sounds like he's going to get top 10 draft capital. And, that's a big deal in my process as well at this point, at least before I've really dug in to these guys. So if that's the case, he has that type of production, that type of draft investment from his team. To me, he's the 102 and he's the 102 as well, because I think the rest of this class is pretty shaky. I think, super flex, this is not a good year to need a quarterback in super flex, I don't think. Then I think after McMillan, you're kind of talking about tier 2 running backs as the next couple guys off the board.
Yeah, usually that top 5, top 10 draft capital for rookie receivers. Those guys do bust, but it doesn't happen all that much. I said he's either the 102 or 103. The other drafts I've seen where he is not the 102, it's usually Omarion Hampton, who's been the 102. What about Hampton has you excited? Is he your running back 2 in this class as of right now?
Yep. Yeah, he is, and he might be my 103 even in Superflex. That's how down I am on these quarterbacks. Maybe that'll change. I mean, if Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders go 1 overall, it's going to be tough to push them down too far in these Superflex drafts. But Omarion Hampton, he's 220 pounds. He ran for over 3,000 yards over the last 2 seasons, and he caught 67 passes. That's an exciting profile to me. Big back who can catch. He looks like a guy who at least has the potential to be a 3-down back in the NFL. We know how rare those are nowadays. And Hampton seems like a lock for day 2, probably a round 2 pick, which is, pretty nice for a running back in this day and age.
I think the other thing I have to bring, I should have brought this up right after we were talking about McMillan. I do remember after the NFL draft last year, Jared, there's a lot of people talking about, I can't wait till Luther Burden gets to the NFL. He's going to, and a lot of the mocks I saw at the end of the 2024 draft had Luther Burden as the first receiver off the board. Yet, there are some warnings that we should understand before we get all crazy excited about Luther Burden III. What are some of those red flags that maybe gives you a little bit of pause?
Yeah, I mean, his production kind of fell off a cliff this past year, and I know a lot of that was because Missouri's offense just wasn't nearly as good. But I think even his market shares were down. So a disappointing season for Burden. I think the other concerns, he's undersized. I think that might be an issue in the NFL. And then if you look at how he produced in Missouri, a lot of it was on design stuff. He was like near the top of this class in like percentage of yards coming on screens and other type of manufactured touches. So I think there's some concern as like, can he produce on his own? Can he go out and win on these routes one-on-one on the outside, or, was he more of a manufactured production guy at Missouri? Now we do like the manufactured stuff because that tells you Missouri realized that, he was their best player and they wanted to get the ball in his hand. So it's not all bad news, but I think there is at least some question of, if he can do kind of like the, real wide receiver stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of real wide receiver stuff, Travis Hunter, how much real wide receiver stuff is he going to be doing this year? Yeah. Matt Schauf probably has to, your cohort at DraftSharks has to just be loving this. The guy who is going to contribute on both sides of the ball. There is no question the talent, the athleticism that Hunter has. My concern is what happens if I soak a mid or even an early first-round rookie draft pick into Travis Hunter, and he's just playing corner a ton, and he's not out there playing receiver. How much receiver is he going to play? Is the fact that he plays corner going to affect how much he's out there on offense? I don't think we're talking about it enough, but your thoughts on Travis Hunter as far as how much offense is he going to play once he gets to the next level?
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't think anyone does. I think it's going to depend on the team that drafts him, right, and how they view him. I'm glad I don't have any rookie drafts before the NFL draft because I have no idea what to do with Travis Hunter if I had to do a rookie draft at this point or really anytime over the next couple months. But I mean, it's going to matter even if he's quote unquote primarily a wide receiver and plays some cornerback. Like that's still going to limit his offensive snaps, I would think, to an extent. There's no way, right? He's going to be a full-time player on both offense and defense. He's going to be, playing reduced snaps on one side of the ball. So it's definitely going to matter. The extent to which it matters, like we have no idea at this point. If he's like primarily a cornerback and only playing limited snaps on offense, like I don't know how you take him before the back half of round 2 of rookie draft, because it's going to be tough to trust any player just playing that little on offense.
I think that this is why we have our rookie drafts after the NFL draft, because we will have an inkling of how these teams are going to be utilizing Hunter going forward. And then the other thing to keep in mind, and I heard somebody else talking about this. Well, when Hunter's on the field, he's going to get the ball. Well, defenses are going to know that too, and if that's the case, we've never, and we have nothing to compare it to, right? There's no precedent for this. So that also makes it kind of a mystery wrapped in a riddle. Final question. I don't want to do an empty tease, so I want to do a final question and talk about Cam Skattebo or Skattebo. I'm still not sure of the pronunciation. I got to get dialed in on these rookie pronunciations here too pretty quick. I didn't watch a ton of Arizona State games this season, but I did see the Texas game, and he was awesome in that game. I don't want to let one game cloud my judgment on how good this guy is going to be. Knowing what you know about Skattebo, how much of his game is going to translate to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, he's exciting from a fantasy perspective, right? Because he, kind of like Amon-Ra Hampton, he has the size to be between the tackles and goal line back, and he obviously has the pass catching ability too. So I think Skattebo, he more than anyone else, I think I want to see the draft capital. I want to see what the NFL thinks of him. If he goes on day 2, I think it's wheels up for him. I think he, could be someone right away contributing, especially in these full PPR leagues because of his pass catching ability. If he ends up going in like round 5, I think we'll have to like tap the brakes and say, okay, the NFL, maybe doesn't see it. Maybe he is just more of a try hard guy who's just not going to quite be athletic enough. Combine's going to be big for him as well too. I want to see how he tests. I think the expectation he's going to be kind of a below average athlete, but maybe he surprises there, and that would help him as well. But he's very exciting. I think the upside is there. I think the floor is pretty low as well, but I think in these early best ball drafts, I think if you're looking at rookie running backs to take later on, I think he's definitely someone I have my eye on.
Yeah, he's fun. He's going to be a fun guy until we see him out on the field. He's going to be a fun guy to draft and be following how people are, how the NFL handles him, like you said, as far as how much draft capital he gets. Was joined tonight by Jared Smola, the former, and let's face it, soon to be next world's most accurate ranker once again. Follow him on the X at Smola DS. You read all of his thoughts and everything he's producing for DraftSharks at DraftSharks.com. The 2025 rankings will be due out in about 2 weeks or so. Jared, what else are you working on over at DraftSharks? Not only right now, but for the rest of the season too.
Yeah, outside of the 2025 redraft rankings, we're basically focused on Dynasty and the rookie class at this point. So like I said, our rookie rankings are already up on the site. And we don't just do rankings, we do Dynasty projections. So we take the baseline projection, which is the current upcoming season projection, and then we apply aging curves we've looked at for each position to come up with 3, 5, and 10-year projections for every player. Then we kind of combine all that together to spit out one DMVP plus value for each player, just to kind of give you a one single number to look at when you look at dynasty value. So these are more than just dynasty rankings. They're kind of above and beyond that. I think they're much more scientific and end up being more accurate because of that. So those are up on the site now. Like you said, Eric, we do have the dynasty rookie mock draft we put out last week, and then we're going to start pumping out our dynasty prospect profiles. These are deep dives into the top 30 or so prospects in this class. So look for those to start coming out in the next few weeks.
DraftSharks is unequivocally one of my favorite websites, and Jared Smola, one of my favorite people in the industry. So glad we got to chop it up for 2 hours. I learned a lot tonight, and I might be a Ted McMillan fan now. So there's that as well. Jared, will continue to follow you on the X at Smola DS. Thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That was fun.
MyFFPC.com is where to go for Dynasty Orphans and the Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments. Check it out now, MyFFPC.com. That's going to do it for tonight's show. We'll be back at 7 o'clock next Thursday. Ryan Reynolds, no, not the actor, the guy from Established the Run and Player Profiler, will join me for a Super Bowl preview episode as well. For Jared Smola and our producer, Matt Deutsch, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Be good, everyone. Talk to you next week.